Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, please, because it looks like my mic's not on. Oh, good, 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 good. Take them down. Thank you much. Welcome, teachers, guests, and mentors to our 6th Expansion Forum course for the year. My name is Jan Littlebear, and I will be one member of our forum team this evening. Before we jump into the coursework for the evening, like always, we're going to take a few minutes just to review the course requirements. Tonight we have guests who have never attended one of our forums and registered students online who have attended several topics. We have teachers being mentored by ASMP and teachers very experienced. So welcome everybody. You'll note the CRN numbers changed, but we're all good to go. Those of you taking this for credit need to send your work to your instructor of record. You know that by now. And tonight we have Carol Giroux for first-year mentored teachers, Hal Neese for second year, and everybody else comes to me. If you have questions about your work, check your syllabus online for the deliverables or ask your instructor of record. Okay, for you new folks especially, listen up. These are the tools that we have for tonight, and there are quite a few of them. The ones you see on the screen, I will highlight a couple. When it comes to typing on the whiteboards, we prefer that you use the single A, and when you click on the text tool A, you'll see that it pops out a single A. That's the one that we ask that you use because we can move it around easier. And you'll also, once you get that, you get some options for increasing the size or the color. That's helpful too, so don't be afraid to play with that. The other tools are pretty self-explanatory. Feel free to try them out when using the whiteboard. I want you to pay attention to the 4 little icons to the left of the main room box. We will be using those tonight as well. It's helpful to use those interactive emoticons because it shows your speakers and your colleagues that you're engaged. If you walk away, hit that away button, but don't forget to hit it again because we do take attendance periodically. If you have a question throughout the night, raise your hand using that palm. And the polling tool, if you'll look up at it right now, you'll see a little small A. We're going to be using that tonight. The main room box is where you will be moving yourself to and from, and one more tip, taking a picture. To take a picture for a Mac, it shows you on there what to do. And if you've got a PC, they make it really simple. They just give you a key to do that. The timer shows on the screen in front of you, and it is located on your actual Blackboard Collaborate up near the top. So pay attention to that too. We don't use it too much except when we're in breakout rooms, so pay attention when in the breakout room. Grouping ourselves tonight. Okay. If you teach many or all grade levels, or if you're a special ed teacher, you will choose the grade level where you're most comfortable or have the most concerns for meeting classroom needs. The polling tool tonight, take a look at the screen. We're going to be doing some assessment testing, seeing what you know about assessment already, kind of like a KWL. We're going to find out what you know. And so you're going to click on that small A to the left of main room, and you will be clicking either A, B, C, or D. Okay, that's it for tech tips and course information. Now, normally, those of you that have been here throughout the year, you know that I turn this over to Carol at this point, and she continues. However, Carol is having issues and is a little bit late tonight. She will be here, so I am going to pretend I'm Carol just so those of you that haven't heard from her before know who she is when she does get here. So she would, first of all, thank me. She would extend a warm welcome to our 6th Expansion Forum of the year. Our topic tonight deals with using assessment to guide instruction and planning for and delivering differentiated instruction. 2 very important topics in serving our diverse student learners. Carol is in her 8th year as an Alaska statewide mentor. Over the course of her 35 years in the classroom, she's had the privilege of working in a wide variety of culturally and linguistically rich educational settings, from numerous rural Alaskan villages to diverse classrooms in Fairbanks and Anchorage. These experiences have enriched her teaching and personal life to a great extent. A quick look at our agenda for tonight. I'm just going to jump down. We have our normal things, but I'm going to jump down to the 3 learning pieces. We will have Marilyn working with us on assessing your assessment knowledge, and another, either Marilyn or Linda, on using that data to inform your instruction. And then finally, we're going to look at differentiated instruction, and you will see DI used a lot tonight. It's just quicker, and we've told you before, we're in education and we talk acronyms. Okay, the standards tonight. The Alaska Statewide Mentor Project uses all 8 Alaska's teaching standards and the 5 cultural standards in our work with you. The cultural standards will be discussed towards the close of our time together, as always. The 8 standards listed on your screen use a common language and describe a shared vision for Alaska teachers and best practices that support them. Our guide also incorporates and informs a developmental view of teaching, while at the same time fostering excellence in learning. These Alaska teaching standards guide the mentoring we do with each of our ECTs, and I'm sure they guide those experienced teachers that are working with me. I know that because I'm learning a lot from you. These forums are designed to enhance our work with all of you and narrow our focus for one forum to specific standards. So tonight we're really focusing on the orange ones, 2, 3, 5, and 8. Acronyms, acronyms, acronyms. I'm going to just say we all know that in education we have a million of them, so glance at the slide. And throughout the night, if you have a question about an acronym we might use that we forget to clarify, use that palm, raise your hand, and we will tell you what that acronym stands for. Another thing we try to do throughout the evening is model best practices for you, and we get a lot of them from this book that's on the screen, 49 Techniques from Doug Lemov's book, Teach Like a Champion. We've listed 8 of his 49 techniques on the slide, and we will hit some of these in tonight's presentation. And we always like to call on somebody right now, so hold your breath. I'm not sure who I'm going to call on, but it gives us practice in turning on and off the talk button. So, Corey Shepard, would you read those factors on the screen for us, please?
Number 22 is cold call. Number 10 is double plan. Number 13 is name the steps. Number 26, everybody writes. Number 28, entry routine. Number 25, wait time. Number 30, tight transitions. And number 46, the joy factor.
Thank you, Corey. Notice how Technique 22 is presented on this slide with the orange background and the blue text in the upper right-hand corner. That's how each technique will show up on the slides tonight, to simply remind you we are modeling a particular technique from this book, Teach Like a Champion. As you know, Carol and Hal are the coordinators for these courses, and that's who is the head of it. Presenting this evening are 2 other assessment and differentiation experienced teachers working as mentors with the ASMP project. Each of these other mentors are going to introduce him or herself when they talk to you this evening. Hal and Carol are the expansion forum coordinators for all ECT expansion forums. Your follow-up questions can be directed to either of them or to your mentor directly if you are in the project. And as we always remind you, if you're not in the project, you direct your questions to me, Jan. Okay, this is really an important part of the evening, especially for the newbies. We have a collaborative set of norms that we use in all of our forums. So we would like you to keep those in mind as we start our discussions tonight. Equity of voice simply means please allow everyone an opportunity to add to the discussion, and please be willing to contribute to the conversation. Active listening. Let's do our best to listen mindfully, staying focused to what others are saying without thinking about how we should respond. Respect for different perspectives. Let's honor and learn from one another's unique views by listening and considering experiences and viewpoints that may or may not parallel our own. Safety and confidentiality. When sharing personal experiences and observations in an effort to respect privacy and retain confidentiality, please withhold names of specific sites or people. And online etiquette. We ask that you please state your name before you speak, even though we can see it in the box usually, into the microphone. And remember to click off the mic/talk button when you finish talking. The chat box is available for questions, comments, or just to let us know if you run into any glitches with the audio or when recording on the whiteboard. Here's key to success for tonight's forum. By definition, a forum means an open discussion. Because of this, we have a high expectation that you participate to a high degree by sharing your thoughts and ideas verbally and in writing on the whiteboards, and we thank you in advance for that. Okay. Here are the outcomes for the evening. I'm going to do another cold call, and let me see. Scroll down. Samantha, do you mind reading the outcomes for tonight, please?
Identify and discuss types and purposes of assessment, analyze data to inform instruction, identify multiple ways to assess student learning, define differentiated instruction, identify essential components of differentiated instruction, explore and brainstorm ways to differentiate, culture matters, and balance professional.
Thank you, Samantha. And for my colleagues, I want you to know that my sound has gone and I can't hear a thing, so I learned that I can just look at that microphone, and when Samantha let go of it, I knew she was done. Moving to the next slide, we are going to have you work on a connector tonight, and you can either write on a piece of paper or type on a Word document, but here's what we want you to do. We're going to give you 3 minutes. We want you to spend the next 3 minutes thinking about and capturing your thoughts on how you use assessment to inform your instruction. We all do it. We're going to have you think about it purposefully. What kinds of things are you doing now to meet the many diverse learning styles and comprehension needs in your classroom? Please be prepared to share out when we come back together as a whole group. We might practice cold call, so be ready. I'm going to set the timer now for 3 minutes, and when it dings, one of us is going to facilitate what you've shared out. Thank you.
Somebody's mic is on. You need to turn off your mic, please.
Can you hear me? I'm calling in over the phone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Hello.
we can.
Oh, do you know how I mute my mic on the phone? I'm having trouble getting in online on Collaborate.
Ooh, I do not know that. If somebody knows how to do a mute on a phone, would you speak up? Is it what kind of phone do you have?
I'm just calling in on my cell phone. I'm trying to get in on Collaborate still, but
I think some people are putting some ideas in the chat box, but you probably can't see that. So they are suggesting *69, or maybe a button on the screen of your phone. So if it's an iPhone, there should be something on the screen that will say mute. Give that a try.
okay. I'll try *6. Hold on. Did that work?
Sounds like it. We're not hearing any background, but I'm not sure we can hear you. So let's we'll go ahead. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, we're glad you're here. So do we have some people that would like to share some ideas here on how you use assessment to inform differentiated instruction?
Hi, this is Marianne in Nicoria. Can anyone hear me?
Marianne, we could hear you. Did you have something you wanted to contribute? Okay, I'm going to ask that you share out in one of two ways. Either press the talk button, I'm going to let go of it, and share out for everybody to hear, then remember to release it when you're done, or using that gray A tool that I talked about earlier, find an empty spot on this slide and just type out your thinking. So let's go ahead and do that for a couple of minutes.
It doesn't work.
Oh, you have to put it on.
Hi, Dee. Yeah, we're in a class right now. What? You know, some of those eliminate classes. Yeah. But you're walking. I know, that's because that's the only time you ever call when you're walking. Okay.
Okay, folks, when you pick up the mic, remember to click it off because we're hearing extemporaneous other things. And also, if you want to experiment with that A tool, you can make the font a little bit bigger. Just a suggestion. Go ahead. We'll give this about another 60 seconds. And go ahead and use the mic.
Hi, this is Brenda Johnson. I just had a couple ideas. I was making notes during the question, and I said I use a lot of the formative assessments, exit slips, thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, hands up if you understand, and I do a variety of summative assessments as well. And I think the formative assessments as well as observations really help me figure out how to differentiate my reading groups and different instruction.
Hi, this is Liz Shababberly. So I usually do multiple kinds of assessment at once. For example, when I ask students to make a PowerPoint showing the progression of classification of a certain species, this is assessing whether or not the students are able to create a PowerPoint, add pictures and text to the PowerPoint, display their knowledge or understanding of classification and other types of content knowledge. So that's the way that I usually use it. Exit tickets are awesome as well. They really help me figure out what students have learned throughout the lesson.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Lori. I'm going to move us on now. And for those of you that are new tonight, it's good to know that you will have the opportunity to come back to this slide later and take copies or notes or anything you need. So, okay, it seems like we're really already well on our way to understanding how assessment informs our instruction. Now let's see how much we actually know about all of the many assessment terms that are out there. So for this first learning piece, Marilyn is going to help us move through our assessment learning piece. Marilyn?
Hi, I'm Marilyn White, and I'm privileged to be a part of this group to discuss one of the imperatives of teaching, assessment and differentiation. My support person for this segment is Linda Fry, but she'll be introducing herself to you a little later. Rebecca Donahue, would you read the comic, please?
Today's test is 70% of your final grade, which makes up 35% of your grade for the semester and 20% of your grade for 50% of your scholastic career for 15% of the curriculum. If you can explain this to the person next to you, you pass the test.
Thank you. We chose this comic because it's an obvious connection to this evening's expansion forum. When we talk about assessment and education, assessment is typically considered, quote, the process of gathering and discussing information from multiple and diverse sources in order to develop a deep understanding of what students know, understand, and can do with their knowledge as a result of their educational experience. The process culminates when assessment results are used to improve subsequent learning. Whew. If you're able to explain and summarize this, you pass the test. So, seriously, let's go through the following slides and assess your assessment knowledge focusing on these two standards. Number 2, student learning. Number 5, assessing student learning. The outcome or purpose for this first learning piece is to be able to identify and describe different types and purposes of assessment. These next few pages contain multiple choice questions on assessment vocabulary. The vocabulary will come up more than once tonight, so we're using this quiz to review, clarify, and define commonly used assessment terms. 7 questions on this quiz, and you'll be asked to answer each question by polling. As you recall, the polling is on the left side of your main room. It gives you a choice of A, B, C, or D, and you're going to click your choice after the question is read. Remember, you're going to select only one letter. Jan showed you that earlier. And if you're not sure, please make your best guess. Let's do the first one together. Okay, I'm going to ask you to read the question on your own and choose your answer. You can see on the bottom of the page that your answer is entered, and we're able to assess everybody's understanding. So click on it. Jan is identifying the polling on the bottom, I hope. I don't see anybody clicking. I see that A has 21, B has 6, C has 6, and D has 0. but it didn't make a graph on the page like I expected it to. So let's look at what the answer is. The answer is A, formative assessment. And so, Betty Walters, would you read the Burke quote about formative assessment?
Provides information to both the teacher and the student about student progress toward learning goals, and the constructive feedback encourages students to self-assess and teachers to adjust instruction in order to improve performance.
Thanks, Betty. Second question. The assessment of student achievement at the end point of a course, unit, or their education. Which one of those words describes this assessment? We have the graph showing up, and you can see how we think. So a lot of people are not responding because it says none, and most people are saying B, summative assessment. Going on, let's see what the answer is. Summative assessment. And Katie Straley, will you read the Robinson quote about summative assessment, please?
Summative assessment is the analysis and evaluation of the data that have been collected throughout the formative assessment process. If the data are valid and reliable, teachers interpret them and make decisions about students, programs, and instruction.
Thanks, Katie. Next question, number 3. Read it. Real-world tasks. Make your choice. Everyone needs to make a choice. The graph is showing up. If you were in your classroom watching this, you would see that if somebody is not participating, it shows up on the none, although you can't tell who the person is really. All right? Most people have said D, authentic assessment. And the answer is D, authentic assessment. Susan McIntosh, will you read the Archibald and Newman quote, please?
Authentic assessment is a valid assessment system that provides information about tasks that are worthwhile, significant, or meaningful. These tasks help students become actively involved in the learning process.
Thank you, Susan. Moving on to question number 4. Select your answer. Looking good. We have a little difference of opinion on this one. But most people are saying A. Some people are saying standard. Some people are saying rubric. The correct answer is the correct answer was benchmark. Rebecca Hasemans, would you please read the Burke quote? Well, Rebecca is not answering, so how about you, Mark? Mark Instinis?
Hi, can you hear me? I guess I can. Okay. Explain what students
Mark, try it again. We don't care if you have an echo.
I can't. I'll read it. Wow.
Well, to save time, maybe I'll read it. It's kind of fun. We're on the moon there for a minute. Benchmarks explain what students must do to meet a given standard. They focus on explicit student behaviors or specific products or performance. Next question, 5. The set of criteria specifying the characteristics of a learning outcome and the levels of achievement in each characteristic. Choose your answer. Okay, it looks like most people are choosing rubric. Checking. And it is correct. It is rubric. Samantha, is it Reiki or Rick? Can you read the Burke quote for the rubric?
A rubric is a scoring guide used to evaluate the quality of students' constructed responses on a performance task.
Thank you. And since performance tasks are usually more creative and subjective, a rubric provides objective criteria to assess subjective work. All right, moving on. If you want to know why that student is struggling, which one of those assessments are you looking for? Okay, it shows that we have, most people think it is C, and looking at the next slide, the answer is C. Lois Walker, would you read the diagnostic assessment statement by Robinson, please?
Diagnostic assessments provide information about children's strengths and weaknesses and are designed to guide instruction. They can also be used to document student eligibility for special services.
Thank you, Lois. Last question, number 7. This one is philosophical. Choose your answer. Boy, that was quick. Moving right on. Well, I don't see it. There is the slide. We can see how we agree or disagree. And I have to admit, the first time I took this, I was wrong about several. So don't worry if you have differences. And the answer is B, differentiated instruction. So, Calissa Schultz, would you read the differentiated instruction quote?
Differentiated instruction not only includes differentiating the content and the method of delivery, but also the performance tasks and assessment tools.
Great, thank you. And I want to say you guys were right on top of that cold call. Nice job. Moving along, we finished the quiz. We've reminded ourselves of the kinds of terms we educators use for various forms of assessment. So pat yourself on the back. The question is, what do you do with the assessment data? So on this slide, you will see that there are a series of options. So as you consider the options, I'd like to define an effective action as one that meets Alaska Teaching Standard number 5. Adjust teaching practice to facilitate student progress towards learning and curricular goals. So using your microphone, not your writing tool on this one, please tell the rest of us in which column you'd like the option placed as an effective use of the data or an ineffective use. We have mentors behind the scenes placing the options for you as you call them. So when you call them out, then allow the mentors to move the options. Now you will notice that sometimes when you try to hit your microphone, if somebody else is on it ahead of you, you don't get to. But somebody will be able to work. So this is not a cold call. Please start with the top, hit your button, and say where you want it to go. Thanks.
Ignore results can go in ineffective.
Look for patterns can go into effective.
Set goals would be effective as well.
I think that call parents can both be ineffective and effective depending on the parent.
Teach in another format is effective.
Scaffolding would go ineffective.
Put in the file drawer would be ineffective.
Do diagnostic testing would go ineffective.
Blaming students would go in ineffective.
Conference with students is effective.
Use differentiation activities is effective.
Adjust lesson plans is effective.
Circular file, ineffective.
Teach in another format is effective.
Look for patterns is effective.
Boy, you guys did a great job on this. Thank you. If you're happy with the way we've organized the options, then show by a clap of hands, that icon on your blackboard, that you think we did a good job. Nice. Excellent, excellent. All right. This might be one that you'll want to take a snapshot of a little bit later. Moving on to Learning Piece 2 then. Now we need to analyze the data to inform instruction. The standards that we're working on for Learning Piece 2 are the same. Student learning and 5, assessment of student learning. But our outcomes are a little different. This time, we want to analyze an example of data from the SBAs, which was the way we used to evaluate students a few years ago, in order to inform or direct our choice for instruction, as well as identifying multiple ways to assess student learning. You knew this was coming because of the graph showing assessment data that we sent out to you previously. You might want to keep it in front of you for the next few slides, because even though it's on the screen on the next slide, it's not easy to read. So let's look at that next slide. This graph shows the scores from the SBAs. Now, the SBAs are used, and then last year we tried the AMP test. We didn't like the AMP test. But SBA means standard-based assessments, and even though we're using a different test, and even though it may change, these scores will enable us to practice the skill of looking for patterns. So the scores, the first column is reading, the second column is writing, the third column is math. And looking at the key, you can see that the green indicates above proficient and proficient, yellow indicates below the standard, and the red is far below. So looking at the top, M and F, are gender. ELL, of course, is our English language learners. And F and R is free and reduced lunch. So the F and R may indicate a poverty issue possibly. ELL is going to possibly be a different culture of some kind. So looking at those, I want you to just share responses. Somebody else is going to be writing them down on another piece of paper. But what are some of the patterns you see? Are there any relationships between the scores in male and female? Are there any relationships in ELL? Or what about free and reduced lunch? Shout it out, please.
That students who have free and reduced lunch scored lower than students who did not.
Similarly, students with limited English proficiency did not score well.
Anything else?
In both yellow and red cases, most students were either both ELL and free reduced lunch or neither. Not very many were one or the other. Most were both or neither.
The ELL, all of them are also FRL, I noticed.
None of the ELL students scored above below proficient in reading and or writing.
The ELL seems to have a greater impact on reading scores.
All right, now you brought out a lot of really good things. And so as you can see, much of the data would lead us to further assessments for specific students. And this is why we do diagnostic assessments. When we begin to look at this and we see what's happening, then we want to know what are we going to do about it. But let's look at question 2 at the top. It says, what is the difference between universal and diagnostic assessments? Can somebody who knows that help us out on that, please?
Universal assessments are typically used to look at a greater population of students, and they can help you look at classroom and school-wide patterns. They're used to inform diagnostic testing when you're looking at eligibility for special education or other more involved services. The diagnostic testing would look closely at areas where they need more support and possibly at times causal factors as well.
That's a great response. Thank you so much. So let's go on to the next slide and make some decisions about what we're going to do next. In listening to what you've said, now Sue's going to type in the background on this. Some of you said that the ELL did not score well, so we're going to put that into the reactions to the data. And you could see that ELL and free and reduced lunch were related, so that should be typed in there. And not all ELL scored, I think would be another thing. Not all ELL scored, oops, I hit my button wrong. Not all ELL scored highly or even proficient on reading or language. And somebody said something about both or neither were in both the yellow and the red. So, looking at that, think about your curriculum. Who needs our attention, and what are you going to do now? What kind of suggestions are there for far below proficient? Use your microphone, please, and the mentors will type.
Back when I was teaching in Florida, we had a grant that allowed us to keep kids after school that needed help in math, and so we had teachers tutoring students after school that needed help with their math.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say tutoring would be a good thing for far below proficient, and that probably would work for below proficient as well, right? Anybody else?
Setting up a double dip system where you have scaffolding classes somewhere else in the day for those students who are needing extra help.
Okay, so you're looking for a scaffolded extra help, which is exactly what the RTI program is all about. We've been talking about in the state recently. I see reading and math intervention programs.
I was thinking it might have to do with RTI and tutoring though, but pulling kids out that need extra help.
Okay, and I see somebody's mentioning peer assistance, peer helpers. Move on to the proficient. What do we do with the kids that are making it? Do we just kind of pay attention to everybody else and ignore them, or what do we do?
Go on or give extra practice.
I always want to challenge them to become above proficient, give them activities that have to do with their interests and challenge them to keep going.
All right. And I noticed that you put some things on above proficient. Does that mean that you think that we should give them just more paperwork to do? Or what? What kinds of things can be enrichment activities for someone that is above proficient?
What about a going beyond research project where they get to choose a topic and they get to research it and then give a report to the class when they're done?
There's also lots of like online programs that they could get into, or I know Anchorage offers like courses where the students get pulled out of their classrooms for an afternoon or two a week, and they get to go and do like it's some kind of science project you can do, or science thing. So it's not necessarily extra paperwork. It's try to find like projects or enrichment classes they can take, extra classes or something like that they could do instead, or just bumping them up in general if they're in high school, bumping them up. We did that here in Cheevac. We had an 8th grader who's reading at a 10th grade level, so they just put him in 10th grade reading class, and it's awesome for him. He's loving it and thriving. It's great for him.
Sounds like a good idea. I see somebody's mentioned Khan Academy. Can someone explain to me about Khan Academy?
I'll jump in there and say something about Khan Academy. I use it in my classroom. It's an online, basically K through college curriculum website where students can watch videos, work sample problems, all in a very game-like, motivating atmosphere. They earn points for answering questions correctly. They get to update their little avatar that represents them on the website. They can earn badges. All the cool things that kids like about games, and all the while it's building their math skills. And for students who are proficient with computer technology, it's a really great way to kind of push them beyond and to catch some up that may be a little behind.
Thanks for sharing that. All right, it looks like you guys are thinking about, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about differentiating instruction, and I see lots of ways for you to actually begin to do that on all of these levels, noticing that the ELL were the ones who were impacted most directly, then I'm thinking that that's really going to make a difference in our understanding, especially throughout the state and in Anchorage. So let's move on now to the third with Linda.
Thanks, Marilyn. Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Fry, and I'm in my third year with the Mentor Project. So this year I'm mentoring in the Lower Kuskokwim School District. I've got teachers in Napakiak, Atmatla, Quigillanok, Quinnahock, Nunnik, and Tuxut Bay. Marilyn White, who actually taught at the same elementary school as me way back in the 1980s, is my backup for this portion of the forum. So thank you, Marilyn. As we move into our third learning piece on differentiating instruction, our focus will be on the second and fifth teaching standards, student learning and assessing student learning. Our outcomes for learning 3 are to define differentiated instruction, to identify essential components of DI, and brainstorm some ideas for differentiated instruction. So why do we need to differentiate our classroom instruction? You all know that the students in your classes come into your room with a huge range of differing experiences, interests, and skill levels. Every one of them has varying strengths and needs, as well as a wide range of learning styles. So simply said, they are unique individuals when they walk through that classroom door. And if we're to acknowledge that diversity and maximize the potential of each student, we need to vary approaches in our techniques so that everyone's successful. Furthermore, research into how people learn, how the brain works, and how one's culture influences learning supports that need for differentiating. So here's some interesting facts. Research suggests that when tasks are too hard for a learner, the brain downshifts to the limbic area of the brain, a part of the brain that doesn't think, but rather is designed to protect an individual from harm. Yep, the student shuts down. We've all seen that before. On the other side of the coin, when tasks are too easy, learners do not show thoughtful brain activity, but rather display patterns that look more like the early stages of sleep. I'm going to pause a minute because I'm thinking I have a microphone problem. And are you able to hear me?
Loud and clear, Linda.
Okay, thanks. It's only when tasks are moderately challenging for an individual does the brain think in a way that prompts learning. So designing tasks at just the right level of challenge is important for the brain to work as we want it to. Research also supports what many of you know firsthand, that a person's culture has an important bearing on how an individual learns. So culture is an important factor in our rural schools where students are growing up differently from the way the most of their teachers did. Culture is also an important factor in our urban schools where the students represent many different cultures, bringing with them a wealth of rich and varied background, experiences, and information. Did you know that Anchorage, Alaska is the most culturally diverse city in America? Culture affects many aspects of how our students learn, such as views of time, preferences for group versus individual work, collaborative or competitive approaches, gender roles, patterns of verbal and emotional expression, or whether they learn best with a part-to-whole or a whole-to-part approach. As Carol Ann Tomlinson said, the goal of the teacher is not to suggest that individuals from a particular culture ought to learn in a particular way, but rather to come to understand the great range of learning preferences that will exist in any group of people, rural or urban,
and to create a classroom flexible enough to invite individuals to work in ways they find most productive. So next we're going to talk about the actual components of differentiating instruction. Ina Lee said, equity is not equal. Students enter school with a variety of skills, background information, and learning styles. But teachers have the task of providing an equal education, at least the essential level of skills and knowledge to all students. To accomplish this task, teachers cannot treat all students equally. Teachers need to meet students where they are and adjust the content, strategies, product, and environment in order to give them an equal opportunity to learn to the best of their ability. So Carol Ann Tomlinson, who presented at the 2016 RTI conference in Anchorage, and some of you heard her, said, differentiation is not an instructional strategy, a collection of strategies, or a teaching model. It's a way of thinking about teaching and learning that advocates beginning where individuals are, rather than with a prescribed plan of action that ignores student variance. Let's take a look at a flowchart that shows the essential components of differentiated instruction. As you look across this flowchart, it's arranged in basically 5 columns, represented by those orange downward arrows. The first column is pre-assessment. So we pre-assess students to determine their readiness for the content, their interests and talents, their learning style, or for prior knowledge about the content that we're going to cover. So this is kind of the diagnostic part of DI. The top box on the second column is curriculum, determined by Alaska standards, the cultural standards, and your district standards. So curriculum determines what you want students, bottom of column 2, to know, to understand, and be able to do as a result of the learning experience in your classroom. So once we've got the curriculum and the students in place, we're going to move over to column 3 and determine where to differentiate our instruction. The content, environment, and or process or strategies used for instruction. Moving to the fourth column, we have product. The product assesses what students have learned and may also be modified in order to differentiate. This is also a column on our organizer tonight. The two-way arrow found between columns 3 and 4 reminds us that we can do backwards planning. We can decide how the students will exhibit their learning and then decide how we're going to teach the unit. This is often a really good approach. And the fifth column is summative evaluation, which is given at the end of a chapter, a unit, or a school year. Some types of summative evaluations can be differentiated and some cannot. So we've turned the topics of this flowchart into a note-taking guide for your use tonight. You're going to be submitting this as part of your reflection, so you use it in whatever way is most effective for you. The columns do not follow the same order of this chart, but they capture the pieces that we can differentiate. So this is the guide you should have received in an email from your mentor, but if you don't have it, that's okay. Just take some time now to fold a piece of paper into 6 sections. Label the columns as seen on the slide, and then you can take notes as we progress through the forum. The graphic organizer, complete with your responses to our reflection questions, there's going to be a portion of your homework tonight. So it's important you keep notes as we go on. I'm just going to wait a few seconds for you to make your guide if needed, but keep in mind you're going to see this again several times. So if you don't get all the headings on right now, that's fine. Now, once we start sharing the essential components of differentiating instruction, use this guide according to your own learning needs, jot down key points, and any other ideas that leap out at you. So now, we're going to consider pre-assessment and learner profiles. Okay, next slide. On the Dare to Differentiate website, Sylvia G. Lewis stated this: assessment is the foundation for differentiated instruction. Results from formal and informal assessments will give you information about the student's readiness for the content. Observations, surveys, and interviews can give you information about the student's learning styles and multiple intelligences. Our next slide
lists some examples of pre-assessment tools that are commonly used. So at this time, have that note-taking guide ready for use. We'll be sharing examples of pre-assessments and provide time for you to add these ideas and others to your own list. So there's many assessments that can inform your decision about how to modify the content strategies, environment, and product so you can differentiate instruction. This is a list of a few of those assessments. Take just a minute to read through them.
Valerie, do you have a question for us?
I was wondering how, can you go just a little bit more, can you just talk a little bit more about how exactly we're supposed to use this? Is it just more of like a listing guide? Like right now I should be listing things for pre-assessment and learning profiling, or just a little bit further into that? Sorry.
We're going to show you exactly kind of how to use that in a bit. We'll even put a sample up with some things on it. So don't worry about it right now. You can just hold on to it. That help?
Sound was all of a sudden better, Linda. Thanks.
Okay, I don't know what's going on, but technology, guys. So many districts, going back to this particular screen, many districts throughout the state are using Ames Web 3 times a year for benchmarking. It's kind of a dipstick to determine if students are below or on benchmark or above level in their reading, writing, and math. So if you find out a student is way below on the Ames Web reading, for example, you might want to use a diagnostic assessment, maybe like the quick phonics screener, to kind of assess what specific phonics skills the student needs remediated. Okay, and on this next screen, please. The previous list of assessments was of assessments to determine student skill levels. So here's a learner profile checklist that'll help determine the student's learning styles. It can give you some information as a student teacher to identify ways to modify the environment, maybe the assignments or the delivery of instruction. It might also help older students to kind of understand their own learning needs as well. So if this is something you might want to use, you might want to take a moment to take a screenshot. Remember, that's done by holding down Command, Shift, and hitting 3. And again, you'll be able to come back to this when we're finished with tonight's forum. Okay, next screen. Now we'd like you to add to the list of pre-assessments. So draw upon your own experiences. Share any formal or informal tools like observations or specific checklists you've used or maybe seen other teachers use. You're going to be using that A text-based feature that we mentioned earlier to type ideas on the whiteboard. Don't worry if you type over someone else's ideas. You've seen we've got someone that can keep it orderly. And also, please, it's really helpful to speak into the mic. Click it on and then off when you're finished. And I'm going to
Can someone fill me in on what PCI is?
see some interesting things I'm not familiar with too. PCI F&P benchmark system. If anybody wants to describe those a little bit, that would be great. I see some things I do know. Close, KWL.
I wrote the F&T benchmarking system. It's the, sorry, it's Jessica Weber. It's the Fountas and Pinnell benchmarking system. It's very similar to the DRA. It's just another way to get like basic reading knowledge.
Thank you. Student self-assessment of the semester is a good idea, the STAR test. Whiteboards to record answers is a great way, too, to see what kids are doing and get an idea of everybody in the class. All right, we got all kinds of great ideas here. Let's go give it a few more seconds, and then we're going to go on to the next screen and kind of talk a little bit more about that guide you're going to fill out. And I've got somebody mentioning here the core reading assessment that diagnoses and pinpoints reading difficulties in specific reading skills, and that's available in several different schools. All right, let's go on to the next one, and we're going to flip back to this screen in just a minute. So even though everyone's guide is going to look a little different, this is an example of what it might look like at this point. Okay, so there's a place that's kind of that yellow column, the second one over where a few have been listed. We've also put that first blue column there to make sure you're thinking about different types of assessments, so diagnostic, formative, summative, and so on. You don't need to fill this first column in for any other section on the worksheet, and you can actually do that later tonight. But for this list of pre-assessments, we want you to kind of note whether each type is diagnostic, formative, or summative. So we are going to go back to the previous slide so you can list some of those assessments, and then in a minute we'll go on to our ideas for products and assessments. So moderator, if you could flip us back one slide, please. Thank you. And if you're having a hard time seeing that, you can also, at the top, adjust the page size so you can get it a little larger if that helps. Okay, and again, you can come back to this if you want. So if you could now go ahead, please, two of them. We're going to go, there we go, thank you. This is a favorite cartoon here. You've probably seen it, but the title of this cartoon could be No Animal Left Behind. We chose it because of its rather obvious connection to the topic of differentiating and the challenges that many students and teachers face because of pressures to perform on statewide testing. Mandates do present a challenge to differentiating, but it's so important to work within the system to respond to the differences among your students. So at this stage in planning for differentiating instruction, pre-assessments would have given you an idea of the differences among your monkeys, your elephants, and your fish. So it's time to start the process of backwards planning by developing the products and summative assessments that you'll use to evaluate your students' learning. So when you're planning, if you start with the end in mind, you'll know what it is that you want your students to learn. Your districts have different approaches to the meeting of standards, so you may need to follow their guidelines for using state and district standards and curriculum. For this section, you're going to be taking notes in that third column of your note-taking guide, and here's some products and assessments listed here to get us started. So a choice board is a flexible tool that allows students to choose activities and products that will be used to assess their learning. You're going to see an example a little bit later, and we'll talk more about that then. You'll also see an example of a checklist. Generally, checklists are used to record students' application of skills and concepts as they're observed by the teacher in settings like class discussions or group problem solving. And of course, we're all familiar with quizzes and tests. So we'll look at a choice board example on this next slide. So this is an example of a type of choice board. This one is called Think-Tac-Toe board. It allows students to demonstrate their learning by choosing any 3 activities in a row. This board was made using a template from a wiki site called Dare to Differentiate. And that site has other examples and templates under the heading of choice boards. There's a link there at the bottom for your easy reference. Okay, now this next slide is an example of a checklist that can be used to collect data on the quality of students' oral language. This was made using a free template from the Teacher Vision website. On the next slide, you're going to share your own ideas, which you can also add to your worksheet under column 3. So what other types of assessments and products for evaluation can you think of? It's fine to add general ideas or specific applications. So again, write some ideas on the whiteboard, and if possible, read or explain what you wrote. And this is a forum, so you're welcome to ask for more detail about ideas that you see on the whiteboard. And I'll release the mic. So think about a final assessment. You're done with a unit, you're done with something. What are some things that you would use to actually have the students help to identify what they've learned to prove their learning? So I like the idea of a PowerPoint so the kids can actually make a presentation on what they've learned. Rubrics are a great thing to use to evaluate a final product, whether that's a book they've made, a movie, poster. Comic Life is a cool app that you can use, I believe, on an iPad where the kids can produce a comic and put their own content in. You see flashcards. Students could create flashcards with things that they've learned and information on the back. Any kind of a real world project is a great way to do that. Some kind of performance task. Dioramas are also a fun thing. It gives a student a chance to use their hands and creativity to show what they've learned about a subject. Somebody wrote down write letters to editor on a hot local topic. That's a great authentic assessment. Somebody in the chat, Roxanne mentioned clickers, something you can get to go with your whiteboard where you can actually kind of give a test and you can get individual results from that if you have that technology available. Okay, we're going to give you a couple minutes to work on filling in that third column, products and assessments. So if we want to quickly to that next screen with the moderator, we can show you what that looks like and where you're going to put it. It's that guess it's kind of a golden products assessments. We have just the 3 general choice boards, checklists, and quizzes and tests. We're going to go back one screen and let you go ahead and write down anything that you see there that that you like and want to remember. You also are welcome to take a screenshot of this too, because there's not enough spaces to put all these fantastic ideas in.
Does it matter what kind of assessment it is, or can we just put it anywhere under products and assessments?
Anywhere under products and assessment. Anything that would be a product to show what students learn, or the kind of assessment you would do. A product can be an assessment. So, yep, anywhere on that column is great. Okay, let's move on to differentiating the contents. Content is the what of teaching, what we teach and what we want students to learn. The majority of the content you will teach is determined by the school district and usually reflects state and national standards. Your district curriculum is going to be your blueprint as you plan units and lessons. Carol Tomlinson says the curriculum tells us what to teach and differentiation tells us how. Differentiating content is not watering down the curriculum. The same content should be taught to all students, but can be adjusted by degree of complexity for the learners in your classroom. Differentiation can show us how to teach the same standard to a range of learners by utilizing a variety of teaching and learning modes. It can be difficult to separate content from the process of instruction, but on this page you can see a few examples of how teachers might differentiate what they teach and how students learn. For example, varied levels of text. Students could be provided text or supplementary print at varied reading levels. A number of publishers offer such materials, and teachers have had some success finding materials online that provide 3 to 4 different reading levels addressing the same content. There's also what's called accessible instructional materials. These are specialized formats of learning materials, such as textbooks that can be used by all learners who are unable to read or use standard printed materials. So these formats might include Braille, large print, audio, or digital text. You can contact the Alaska Center for Accessible Media, which is part of a public nonprofit in Alaska called ATLA. And the contact info for them is noted out on the bottom of this slide. And that is something that I learned about at going to the Special Ed Conference recently. The independent research projects could be assigned to students based on their interests and adjusted by complexity according to their prior knowledge and their skill levels. So some of those ideas on the last page could be adjusted for different students. Adjusting questions. Teachers can intentionally utilize questioning techniques to ensure that all students can contribute to the class discussion at their readiness level. In addition, assignments can be made based on Bloom's taxonomy, with opportunities for students to choose tasks that reflect more or less levels of complexity. Note-taking. Give students a choice of graphic organizers. Some might need one partially filled in. Others may just need an outline. And then learning center tasks at varied degrees can be created with, you can take learning centers and create those tasks at different degrees of difficulty. So let's look at a couple of samples of these. Okay, so here's some samples for how teachers can differentiate for content. This first one is an example of a differentiated reading comprehension menu that could be used in an upper elementary or middle school classroom. The stars represent different levels of complexity of thinking, and they're based on Bloom's taxonomy. So 1 star represents the knowledge and comprehension levels, 2 represents application and analysis, and 3 stars represent synthesis and evaluation. So take a minute to look through the options presented by this teacher. And I'm going to use cold call to ask a couple of you just to read aloud your favorite activity. So now that we've had a chance to kind of look them over, Donald, would you share out one that you think looks interesting, please?
Make a timeline of the main events in the story.
Okay, thanks. How about Elise?
What questions would you like to ask the author? Write a letter to him or her and send it if you can.
You know, that's a great one. Authors will usually write back to kids, and that is so powerful when that happens. I had a student write to different places years ago, and he got answers from every place that he wrote. How about, let's see, Katie Straley, would you read one that looks interesting to you, please?
I like the proposed and alternative ending to the story. Write, illustrate, or act out the new ending.
Yeah, that's a great one. Makes it fun and gives them that power to think that they can be an author too. Let's see. How about Patricia?
Compose a letter to one of the main characters in the book explaining how you feel about their specific action they took or decision they made and how you may have handled it differently.
Great, thank you. That sounds like one that would be a lot of fun too. It really gets them into thinking about that character being a real person, and if you could just stop and talk to them. So thank you. Going on here, in this example, the students might be asked to choose at least one activity from each row, or a teacher could assign specific questions to certain students based on their readiness. And the story the students are responding to could be one that they've read on their own individual book, might be one they've listened to from an iPad, or maybe one that they've read in a group. So the teacher might provide copies of the story with 2 different reading levels. In this way, students are still able to work on common content and skills, but at their instructional level. So the second example shows one way that teachers might address differentiating content in an elementary math classroom. So in this particular example, a pre-assessment showed that some students have already mastered the skill of addition with regrouping, while other students demonstrated varied levels of understanding. So based on this assessment, the teacher chooses to use part of his math time for small group rotations. During this time, the teacher is going to meet with each of the 3 flexible groups, and they're indicated by 1, 2, 3 with circles, and provide instruction that is at the student's learning level, while the other groups will be working on independent practice or partner math games that help them practice and apply the skills and concepts they're learning. And note that the independent practice and math games are actually differentiated for each group. Now, we're going to use the whiteboard and a talk button to add some more ideas. What other ways can you think of that you adjust the content of your teaching based on what you know about students' readiness, learning styles, or interests? So please share some of your ideas, and again, feel free to grab that microphone.
If a student is a visual learner, you might use a video.
Great idea.
My kids have just right reading book bags, so they each have their different leveled readers, and they get to trade them out once they can read them fluently, and they love being able to do that.
Like that idea where you choose this for them. Got somebody here that's incorporating a lot of the audio video. We got Brain Pop, Schoolhouse Rock, Magic Schoolhouse, all kinds of different things that are available online. Somebody explain more or less videos? And just reading so many of these are great. I see expand a social studies unit by reading a book, re-watching instructional videos. Okay, again, we're going to give you some time right now to go ahead and write some of those down. You're going to be putting this in the 4th column on your organizer. And that's what it looks like there, that one right there in the center. So we will flip back and let you put some notes down. Remember, you can come back to this you're going to be able to flip through all the slides for a couple hours after the form ends. So we'll give you about a minute here, and then we're going to move on to our next slide. Okay, and let's go ahead and move on here. We're going to talk now about instructional methods and strategies. So as we're discussing process, you're going to be taking notes in the 5th column of your guide, and we will give time to come back to that again. So content is the what, and process is the how. When you're planning, you think about what the students will be doing. So this, too, is an opportunity to differentiate. You might adjust the material by readiness, learning style, or interest to help them all to be successful. As you're teaching and working with students, you'll continually check to see who's getting it, who needs more support, who could benefit from having something presented in a different way, or who could be motivated by connecting to personal interests or working in a group. On this slide, we have some ways of differentiating the method of instruction. I'm going to give you time to read through this yourself. First, let's think about capitalizing on those interests students already have. If you look at this next slide, find that these are some interests that you probably have already learned about from that interest survey that you gave. It can be really motivating for students to have opportunities to explore personal interests while they're studying a content. For example, a teacher might include the option for a sidebar study on fashion or weapons during a unit on the World Civil War. In interest centers or using specialty teams, they can be developed in any subject area to encourage the pursuit of your students' interests. Those can be especially good for students who are maybe not needing remedial work but are ahead. So it's a place they can go to when they have like a passion that they want to research, and there it is, ready to go. On the next screen, we're looking about differentiating by creating some new interests through real-life applications and through being introduced to a variety of ways to express your ideas, such as creating movies or poetry or artwork. So on the right here is an example of some student writing that was turned into a piece of art by using a website called testasite.com. Anything you write, and it can be put into all different kinds of shapes, and it's a really nice product for a student to have. The use of flexible small groups is another important strategy, and there's two different purposes and styles. So first, instructional groups can be formed by utilizing the assessment data to target specific skills. And note that these groups are meant to be fluid. You want to assess and regroup frequently. Nobody should be in that same group all year. Secondly, cooperative groups can be formed in a variety of ways to allow students to collaborate with their peers. So using cooperative groups effectively, however, it involves a lot of planning. You have to teach the expectations and how to self-evaluate. But when they're used well, they're a great strategy for differentiating. Now, we're going to go to grade level groups to discuss some instructional methods. And while you're waiting to do that, think about modifications that you have made during the process of teaching, or something you've seen or heard. And you're going to be using column 5 on your reflective worksheet to capture ideas while you're in these breakout rooms. So at this time, over on the left of your screen, there's a little box that says Main Room. If you click on that, it gives you options for different grade levels, and I want you to go ahead and pick the one that fits your situation the best. And the next voice you hear should be the facilitator in your grade level room. So go ahead, grab that main room, and do that now.
Joshua, you want 6 to 12?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Those of you still in the main room, if you'll grab the mic and tell me where you want to go, I'll help you get there. Suzanne, what room would you like to go in? Just grab the talk button and I'll get you. Janet, can I help you? Get in.
Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you each added to your worksheet while you're in that grade level room. And our original list started off with what we have above, which are just kind of the general areas. After your discussions, I hope you have some resourceful ideas added to your process instructional methods column, and you'll be able to look at that again at the end of tonight's forum. So one particular method, scaffolding, is an effective instructional method no matter what grade level you teach, and we're going to look at that some more on the next slide. Another aspect of differentiating the content and process of instruction is accomplished through scaffolding. So scaffolding provides support to students. It allows us a means to modify the delivery of content and increase the success for students with various abilities to access the curriculum. So to make an analogy, my cat can jump 3 times his height to get to the fish tank to drink some water. Now if I need to clean my chimney, it's about 3 times my height, but there's no way I'm going to be able to make a leap like that. But you give me a ladder or some scaffolding, and I could get to that roof and get the job done. Not saying that I want to, but it could be done. So take a look at some of the scaffolding ideas presented here. I love all the ideas on this slide. This might be a great screenshot to save for further study later. So that's a Command-Shift-3 or 4 to get those crosshairs. Our last component of differentiated instruction is environment. So we're now going to think about altering the classroom environment to provide differentiation. I like that first one, change seating. How many of us have created the perfect seating chart and on the first day said, nope, that's not going to work? After looking over this list, we'll be sharing a whiteboard on the next slide talking about going beyond the four walls for a learning environment. So I invite you to review this list for a minute. Use your note-taking guide to jot down any ideas that speak to you, and then I'm going to share one example. So in thinking about time of day, some of your students might be really lively and energetic first thing in the morning, or they might be sleepy and sloth-like. So you may be able to adjust your instruction to adapt to their rhythms or give them choices on when they may do an independent activity. I taught in a middle school, and one year we decided to flip-flop the first and last periods of the day for the second semester. It was amazing how different those afternoon kids behaved and learned from how they did when they came in first thing in the day. So sometimes just changing when you teach something can really make a difference. Another one I'll just bring up is lighting. If you don't want those kids to be all revved up, turn down a few of the lights, make it a little softer lighting. Sometimes you have to turn them up. If you can control the heat in your school, another great option. Sometimes you can't do that, but keeping it a little on the cool side, especially with those middle schoolers, can keep them from drifting off. So on the next slide, we're going to be sharing and recording some examples on our graphic organizer. So if one of these brings to mind an example you can share, make a note to yourself, and we're going on to the blank screen. And we need, there we go. Great idea. Playing music can make such a difference in a classroom. Just that quiet music for kids to study by and do their work with. Brain breaks is something that certainly has come around in the last several years, and there's options for that, things online you can do, just turning on music, doing pass and move, all kinds of things to get kids up and moving and doing something a little different just for a few minutes. Somebody move the classroom outside. Boy, if you can get up and just take a walk around, sometimes that can change everybody's perspective, get them focused again. I also see the pairing options. Let those that want to be alone, alone. Sometimes we think that when we buddy kids up, they have to have a buddy. That's not true. Some kids work better alone. Some adults do that, and we recognize that, so we need to recognize that with kids too.
Can somebody take the mic and talk about cave art, please?
So I'm an elementary art teacher, and at one of our national conferences, they talked all about simulating different things. And so, for example, I've seen art teachers dim the lights and hang up accent lighting to simulate a museum. Another one was
a parent was throwing out a refrigerator box, and so the teacher took it and spread it out and turned it into a cave art display. And so it was dark and it was small, and they went in there and they turned the lights off, and they just had little lights, and the kids would, she had hung up different examples of, you know, the pictographs and things that you would find on the wall. And so just giving an environment of, okay, we're looking at these pictures on a page or on a projection, but instead actually creating a place for them to go explore. So whether it's, like I said, a museum or a refrigerator box turned into a cave.
Okay, let's take a look at that next one. Here's our environment column. Might look after this section. And before wrapping this up, I want to mention that we are posting some other resources on the Blackboard site under the tab Resources that will be made available to you in the next few days. So if you're signed on as a guest this evening, you will need to access them through your mentor. So now let's wrap up essential components of differentiated instruction with some next steps. Remember, differentiated instruction is a philosophy about teaching, and as a philosophy of teaching, you will add to your knowledge and skills over your entire career. This will not happen overnight, so be gentle with yourself as you plan those next steps. First, recognize the differentiated instruction that you already do. We've seen evidence of that here. Small group instruction for specific skills, student choice for final projects, and commit to add another one more subject. Start small to keep your focus. Pace yourself by deciding on a learning curve that's comfortable for you. Have a strong rationale for the differentiated instruction you do use by using assessment to decide what and who actually needs that differentiated instruction. If you can, plan with other teachers for optimal success and to share the burden. And then communicate with parents what differentiated instruction is and what the benefits can be for their child. Most important to keep in mind that if you are going to have students working independently or in small groups, you really do want to train them to work with each other, setting expectations that will help successfully create your classroom environment and routines, which is the culture of your classroom. And while you're considering culture, we are so fortunate to offer you ASNP's own live in-person resource for teaching through culture, Jan Little Bear.
Okay, you had me earlier today, and I am going to move rather quickly. So those of you that are here for the first time, you're not going to hear the whole spiel. Many of us have heard it before. So this first slide covers the cultural standards. Hopefully you know it by now. Carol, the next slide, please. The two cultural connections that we're going to share tonight, one is worldview, and the second is simply a reminder of a resource. So we are usually most comfortable teaching in the ways we were taught. That's not a surprise to any of us. It stems from our own personal worldview. In my case, it's that of the daughter of a tenant wheat farmer, a Western worldview that includes reading, writing, and arithmetic, and more talking than listening. I've shared that before. We have to remind ourselves to step outside of our own comfort zone in order to meet the diverse needs of all learners. This next slide you saw earlier when the girls were talking to you about using culture. It does matter. My husband's worldview, as I've shared before, comes from that of an indigenous learner, a listener, not a talker, a hands-on constructivist, someone who observed how to do things before doing them, and who experienced many, many, many stories told by his grandmother and shared in the oral tradition of his Northern Cheyenne people. So imagine me, the talkative daughter of a tenant farmer, Western schooled, he, the son of a Native American woman raised by his grandmother who spoke only Cheyenne, he, a grandson who learned by listening, watching, and doing. The next slide is a place, I'm actually going to ask you to do this, but I'm only going to give us 60 seconds. I just want you to very quickly type up there, what is your background, culture, worldview? So grab that text tool and put it up there very quickly. I gave you mine at the top, and I'm going to start my 60 seconds right now. I don't want us to go over. We just are kind of curious about who we have in the room tonight. Hard worker, I agree with that one too. White, non-religious, me too. Italian, Japanese, British. Oregon hippie. Carol will identify with that one. I'm speaking for you, Carol, rather than letting go of the mic. Take charge from Nebraska. Conservative Christian. Midwest Bible Belt. You know, people often will look at us non-native people and think we don't have a culture. We have a culture. It's a very important culture which we have subjected to our learners for years. So it's important that we be aware of our own culture because it is through that lens that we need to adjust and differentiate some of our instruction. Okay, this was kind of fun. The dinger's going to go off. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Granddaughter of Polish immigrants. Thank you. Seriously, that was kind of fun. And looking at the fun part of it is important, but the serious part of it is you need to know where you come from in order to filter your instruction in ways that can be heard and learned by your students. The next slide, Carol. This one is way too tiny, and I know that, but I knew you would get to take a copy of it, and the link at the bottom takes you right to it. It shows you the two worldviews of the traditional and the Western. Next slide, Carol. I've shared the first one with you before. I have not shared the second one with you. It's new, so again, you can come back and get this link. I'll tell you why the Culture in the Classroom resource is an excellent one. It was created just this last 6 months by CERC, Southeast Regional Resource Center, and it was designed for administrators to make sure that teachers in the evaluation process are embedding culture. It gives you a roadmap for the 4 of the 5 standards that will be evaluated, and inside this booklet it gives you examples of artifacts and evidence. You can just Google Culture in the Classroom and it's online for free. So that totally is worth your time. And that got me through culture, and you know by now we always want to make sure you're taking care of yourself, and so I'm going to turn you over to Hal. Hal?
Well, thank you, Jan. Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. My name is Hal Neese, and I live in Homer. I've taught 33 years for the Kenai District as a middle school and high school science teacher, and I'm now in my 7th year as a statewide mentor. It's an important standard, number 8, and the Mentor Project believes that it's really important to maintain and sustain a very balanced professional and personal life. So we always look at that at the end of our forums. Now, we're all very aware of just how stressful and demanding our first year of teaching can be, especially after a full semester of all the challenges, getting to know and motivating our students, working in the classroom management department, developing a discipline plan, getting to know our parents, hosting conferences, compiling and sending out grades, having those formal evaluations from our administrator, keeping pace with the curriculum, then the extracurricular commitments, and that list just goes on forever, it seems. So tonight, I just want to share with you a story, and you may have heard of it. It was developed by a well-known American educator, author, and businessman, and he was a keynote speaker for many years. His name was Stephen Covey, and he made this parable about rocks, pebbles, and sand. So I'm just going to share this with you, and it came from his best-selling book, First Things First. It goes like this. A philosophy professor once stood in front of his class with some items on the table in front of you, and when the class began, he picked up a very large, empty mayonnaise jar, and he proceeded to fill it with these pile of rocks. They're about 2 inches in diameter, and he asked the students when it was all full, if in fact it was. And of course, they said, yes, it is full. Then he shook the jar, and he took some pebbles, and he poured those into the jar. And as he shook them more, they rolled around in between the areas between the rocks, and he asked the students one more time if they thought the jar was full, and they agreed, yes, it was. He then picked up the box of sand, and he poured it into the jar. And of course, the sand filled the extra remaining smaller spaces in the jar. And he then asked his class one more time, is the jar full? And they unanimously said yes. Now, said the professor, I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life, and that the rocks are the most important things. Those are your family, your partner, your health and children, things that if everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be very, very full. And the pebbles are the other things that matter. It's like your job, your house, your car, maybe your snow-go. And then what about this stuff, the sand? Well, that is everything else, and that's really the small stuff. Like maybe all those social media apps we hear on our cell phones day in and day out. And then he continued, if you put the sand in the jar first, there's no room for the pebbles or the rocks. And the same goes for your life. And if you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you end up sacrificing a lot, as you then have no room for the time for the things that are truly important for you. So it's important to pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Taking care of your health, playing with your kids, taking your partner out for a wonderful meal, enjoying those holiday times, like the ones you just did a month ago, and to be sure that you had time with your family members and the loved ones in your life. Because there's always going to be time to go to work, clean the house, give a dinner party, or fix that disposal. So in concluding with this story, just take care of the rocks first, the things that really matter to you. Set your priorities, make room for the pebbles, and the rest is just sand. Hopefully coming off this recent holiday season, you took time to rejuvenate, refresh, and truly celebrate those important rocks in your life. We're running a little bit, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes here, so I want to kind of skip through this, but there was another screenshot where I wanted you to be thinking about this one here. You might want to just take a screenshot of it, and we were going to, maybe let's just take about 30 seconds, and everybody type in something that you consider your rock or your pebble and a little bit of sand, and let's just see what comes up with, but we'll keep this short because we want to wrap up on time tonight. Okay, great. Okay, the job, yes, family. Family is really key, isn't it? Just stressing our family, and I love the one, there's a dog, oh boy, look at this come up. Housework, yes, that can be sand, can it? Yeah, great, good one. I showed this to I have 2 daughters and a son. I showed it to one of my daughters one time, and she got a kick out of it, and she said, Dad, where do you put chocolate? She says, I'm going to put it in my rock pile. Okay, that was great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was a little bit of fun, but it's also important. It's important fun. So let's go ahead and wrap up this evening. And I'm going to read this real quickly. If you were to fold your hands together naturally, you would have a comfortable close fit. And the goals of curriculum differentiation are to find the closest, most comfortable fit between the learner and the curriculum. And by varying the process and the content and the product and the environment to match the needs of the learner, it can help us reach that close fit. That was by Dr. James Curry, and it really does encapsulate our whole evening tonight. Let's move on to the course requirements and our outcomes for tonight. We had quite a packed agenda, as you can see, and I'm not going to read this slide. We concluded, Jan did the cultural connections for us, and we did the balanced professional. So that's going to take us now to our reflections. And before that, just an overview of our outcomes. Again, this is an important slide because these are critical components of effective teaching, and you all contributed a great amount of time tonight to make this a lively, interactive forum for us, and we want to thank you for that very much. We're going to go now to our reflection here, and we've come to the final slide. Almost, actually, this is the graphic organizer that you're working on tonight, and I just want to review that real quickly. You want to send this, have this sent in to your mentor or your course instructor record, and we'll list those on the screen coming up. So make sure you have this ready to go tonight, and with some other reflective questions that we're going to have. So here's our reflection based on what we did this evening. Number one, you want to respond to how have you used assessment data so far this year to meet the different needs of your students. And number two, you want to reflect on considering what we brought to you in tonight's forum on differentiating process, content, product, and environment. What will be your next steps for differentiating your instruction? And third, how can culture, as Jan alluded to, support you in assessment and differentiation of instruction? Now, those three reflective comments, we want you to write down answers to those tonight, along with your graphic organizer. And we want you to send a worksheet to Carol if you're a first-year ECT, to myself, Helen, if you're a second-year ECT, and everyone else, please send yours to Jan. Now, we want you to try to get those in by 9 o'clock this evening, if you could. Also, we'd like to suggest that you keep an archival copy of all of your reflections. Some of you, this may be your last forum, this may be your fourth forum, because that's going to help you go back and fill out your 3 to 5 page final reflection paper due at the end of the year to get full credit. We'd also like to tell you about our 7th upcoming expansion forum. It'll be held on Wednesday, March 6th, same time, 6 to 8 in the evening. And the title of this one will be Meeting the Needs of Students with Fetal Alcohol Syndrome and Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorders. Very, very critical forum, as many of our students have those conditions, and we hope that you can join us then. So thank you again this evening, everyone, for attending this evening's informative, and it was a real valuable forum on using assessment to guide instruction and planning for differentiated instruction. And thank you for your fantastic share-outs and your ideas tonight. It was really a highly interactive night, and we appreciate that very much. I would also like to thank and give tribute to those who presented tonight's lessons, Marilyn White and Linda Frey, and also Betty and Sue for backing them up as their backup people, and any other mentors who were with us tonight who added to our conversation. So on behalf of Jan and Carol and myself and the entire mentor program, we deeply thank you for your professionalism, your dedication, and those heroic efforts that you give your students every day and in those communities where you reside in Alaska. And as you continue your hard work during the second semester, have a great rest of this week. And as I like to sign off, as Garrison Keillor always says when he does, I'll quote him now, be well, do good work, and please stay in touch. Thank you, everyone, and good night. And I'll leave the mic on in case some of you have a question. Thank you.
I have a clarification. It's March 16th. It was probably just a typo, but it is the 16th, so please make a note of that. And we are going to make the slides so that you can click through them on your own now while each of the facilitators go to our own little workout room and debrief. And I want to thank those of you that gave us some great suggestions tonight for the next time we do this, like having like content area breakout rooms. That's a great suggestion. And I will follow up on the mic and say, when you do go to Blackboard and post, we have had PE instructors posting there, and it does generate a wonderful PE thread. So in the meantime, that might be a way to troubleshoot and get more feedback for your content area. Okay, going to click the mic off.
Hi, this is Marianne in Mikoyak, and if anyone can hear me, I'm wondering how do I go back through the slides from tonight?
I don't think it's been set for us to actually flip through them because I haven't found that either. I'm going to log out and log back in and see if that fixes anything though.
I'm having the same issue. I think they forgot to push the button that lets us go back.
Okay, thank you. I thought I was missing arrows. Then I thought it was just me.
I'm sending Carol a message. They're in the moderator room right now, or maybe they're back in the main room. No, they're in the... Anyway, I'm going to send her a message and see if she can double check that.
Thank you.
Message sent. I'll let you know if I hear anything back.
Thank you so much.
Melissa, have you got a question I can help you with?
Can you unlock the slides so we can look back through them?
Yes, we thought they were. Let me try it again. Just 1 minute.